In.
Okay, Gail, I think we can start. Let me make sure that folks can see the PowerPoint. Can you see the PowerPoint, Gail?
I can see the flyer.
Okay, good. That's what I want you to see.
Oh, okay. So are we doing the introduction or are we just going straight?
Yeah, do the introduction. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, school counselors from around the state of New York and around the world. Welcome to our webinar. We've been having webinars since September, and it has gotten quite amount of success. And we have a young man here, Derek Francis. He's gonna speak to you regarding strengthening our profession with the inclusion of an equity lens. I met him about a month or so ago. He did a webinar and I was very impressed with the webinar in itself. So I spoke to my executive director, Barbara Rotunda, and we contacted him, so he's here. Just a snippet about who I am. I am the former president of the New York State School Counselors Association. Now my position is professional development chair. Our president, Dr. Wiley, is on our committee. Dr. Corbett, who is in charge of the, Barbara Turner is our executive director. Lisa Mesa is our, she is our membership chairperson, and Cheryl Hall is a past member, and she's a member on our committee. Kathy is in charge of publications. And we can be reached at NYSCA, www.nycca.org. Hopefully most of you, if not all of you, are members of ASCA because they give out some wonderful information, and a New York State Department. For those of you that do not know, we have a new chancellor. Dr. Lester Young is the chancellor of the New York State Education Department. I had the opportunity of meeting him. He worked in Brooklyn, District 13. He was very instrumental there. He worked his way up from being a teacher, and now he is the chancellor. Next slide, Bob. Derek Francis is experienced licensed school counselor and manager of counseling services for Minneapolis Public Schools with a passion and focus in proactive and equity-based counseling. If you have any questions, kindly submit them in the chat. Thank you. Now I'm going to ask Mr. Francis, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be able to connect and share and be able to present for you all in New York. And so I appreciate this opportunity. I want to let you know that I'm really glad for this. I'm going to start sharing my screen now. And so I really want to just, first of all, say thank you. And I want to make sure too that I'm very much aware of just understanding where you all are at right now with the pandemic. And I want to say my heart is going out to a lot of people in the space and throughout the country, and especially in New York, where the pandemic has really impacted the lives of those that you all love, and same with here in Minnesota. So I want to just start by acknowledging that. Also, I want to say thanks to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for sponsoring this presentation. Thank you all, New York State School Counselors Association, for having me. So my name is Derek Francis. I am the manager of counseling services for Minneapolis Public Schools. I also work with Hatching Results, and I love being a school counselor. This is my thing. I enjoy it. I'm so happy to have an opportunity to connect with you all as counselors. I've been a school counselor for 9 years. I've been doing diversity, equity, and inclusion training for the past 4 years. And I just realized as I began presenting, I like to share that I think it's important that we are promoting for more school counselors from underrepresented populations. I didn't see a counselor of color, a counselor that looks like me, until I was 26. And so I really hope that that we're able to increase that for students so they can be reflected in our profession. I want to also make sure that we're connecting and engaging today, because I feel that especially during this pandemic, it's hard to connect with people and laugh and get to know them and know where they're from. So please utilize the chat. Put in there either what school you're from, what level you're at. Also, I'm on Twitter. So if you want to tweet anything throughout, go ahead. And so I share in here the photos of just some things from my career. I started off at North High in Minneapolis, and at the time the enrollment rate was dropping and the school was about to close. And then within 4 years, we turned the school around, awesome team of us. And so that's what that image is there for. And then I have a daughter, her name is Grace. I love her. And so I'm excited to be able to help change the profession and make it more inclusive so that when she's in school, she's able to have some of the same supports that we're looking to fight for now. So that's a little bit about me. I got to give a shout out to New York. I love visiting New York. My dad actually grew up in New York. My favorite treat, oh man, when I was there visiting, is the little waffle stand where they put ice cream on it. That was right in New York. That's me there. And I was in paradise. I love those. And you all are so lucky you get that all the time. Here they have one at the Mall of America here. And then my favorite rooftop in the world, LeBain. I just enjoy the whole energy there. Every time I come to New York, I try to make sure I stop there, and I love the view. And so I am so thankful for any opportunity I get to visit New York. I want to make sure I get to know you all a little bit. So utilize the chat. The only bummer is I can't see the chat. Oh, I see it now. I can see the chat. I want to make sure I get to know you all. I'm a school counselor at heart. I love getting to know people. And so these are some questions that I hope we can get to know. And if you're a counselor and you want to use this as an icebreaker, go ahead and use it too. Because I love using these strategies with students to get to know them. So that's the style and angle we're going to go with today, is making sure we're building relationships and connections too. So put in the chat, this or that. Choose one. Do you prefer call, text, or FaceTime when you're trying to connect with someone? Which one do you prefer, call, text, or FaceTime? Someone put call. For me, I'm a text person, depending on what they want to ask. If it's something that can be textable, like, oh, send me a text. When it's my mom, it's always call. Like, I always like calls from her. I always call her. Okay, looks like there's quite a bit of people that say text or call. Someone said, who's calling? The next one, pancakes or waffles? You already know which one I prefer. I love waffles. I'm a waffles person all day, especially when it's fresh and it's off the iron and you put the butter on it and the butter gets into little grooves. Oh my goodness. I absolutely love waffles. Pancakes are okay, but I'm way more of a waffles person. I think, hey, you know how it is. I know what I like. Let's see, Android or iPhone? I'm a team iPhone person. I like it. It's easier for me. It's very flexible. So, and oh my goodness, Androids. Lisa said Android all day. I'm iPhone all day. Heather said landline. I like my iPhone. It's easy. It's simple. So that's my preference. Dine-in or delivery? Pre-COVID. So this is pre-COVID. What did you prefer? Especially because I know in New York, especially in the city, it might be hard to find dine-in options all the time. I could be wrong with all the busyness. Dine-in, I love dine-in. I absolutely love rooftop dine-in too. Love it. Love it. Soon enough, I can't wait for when things do get safe and open up that you all can dine in again. Cool. I think I got a couple more. I think I got one on here for Bob. Yeah, yeah, that's what you got. Bills, Jets, or Yankees? If you had to pick a favorite sports team to follow in New York, if you had to pick one of those, mine is the Yankees all day. I'm a Derek Jeter fan. I didn't even put Knicks on there because we all know the Knicks. The Knicks they're kind of rough. So I didn't even go there. But Yankees for sure. That's my team. Derek Jeter is one of my favorite players. I feel for you all if you're Knicks. You always know how to ruin your draft picks. But I honestly, and Minnesota does too. I enjoy watching basketball, so I do watch the Knicks. And then the last icebreaker, laugh or make someone else laugh. What do you prefer? To laugh or make someone else laugh? So I know I love making other people laugh. I enjoy laughing, but the joy of connecting with people and making other people laugh is something I love to do. And so I hope that you all had a moment to laugh today. If you would like, use this as an icebreaker with your students. Our role, our profession is around building relationships with students, with them, with each other, us with them, helping them learn strategies to connect and get to know each other, especially especially cross-culturally. That I feel is the role of school counselors. We all have different backgrounds, cultures, races, but you know what? You do activities like this, and we find that unity and affinity around things that we're like, oh, there's so many other things we have in common. And I want to talk today from that heart of knowing that unity is needed in our country, and school counseling is a profession that is so perfect for doing that work. I'm excited. I'm really pumped to share with you all today. Look at the time. I'm glad we got 45 minutes still. I'm glad we spent time to get to know you. So this space is for us to learn, for us to find different things you can do to be on a journey to learn. The fact that you're here, I want to say thank you. I appreciate you being here and wanting to grow. You made an effort. You could have been doing something else. What was it, 4 o'clock there? You could have been having an appetizer and having time to put your feet up. It might be the end of the day for some of you. And so I don't take it lightly that you decided to come and be here to grow and learn. Thank you for being here. And if you're new to having these conversations around race and bias and microaggressions or privilege, I want to also thank you for coming, and I hope that you're able to be vulnerable and open up and think about some areas where you're like, you know what? Oh man, I have said those things before. Or you know what? I didn't speak up in those moments myself. And so I know all of us, it's going to take some vulnerability in this space to really start having some change. And so then we ask that you're also proactive, that you not just hear the things that we talk about today, but you actually do something different. Think differently. And I know sometimes, with us being in a virtual world, it can be easy to sign up and jump on to different webinars and say, oh yeah, I'm going to go to that one. But I'm asking that you engage, that you're right here with me, that we grow and learn together. So wherever you're at, if you're in your living room, grab something to write with, get in your comfy chair, get your favorite snack. I have Clubhouse crackers that I might mess around and eat a couple of. So get comfortable. Let's learn and grow together today. Do something different in your profession and for our students because of our time together today. I also wanted to provide you with something, be proactive. This is an engaging time. It's gonna move, but I also don't want you to stop thinking about what we talked about after the session's done. So there's a sheet in front of you there that you can reflect on and think about, where am I at on some of these things? Not all the things in here we'll cover, but we will cover, you'll see pretty much a lot of themes from this worksheet that you can think about to yourself, like, where am I at? Our goal is to help you come along a journey. And so that's why you have that to utilize. Here's our goals for the rest of the session. We're going to learn some strategies to proactively address and reduce racism and discrimination in your school. We're going to look at how race, privilege, and bias impacts our relationship with students. I'm going to leave you with ideas for how to recruit and retain students from underrepresented populations in higher level classes. And so I'm really excited for us to capture that. And so let's jump into it, just giving you some whys. And I think I want to make sure we're framing ourselves where we're at in our country today. It's January 21st. Yesterday was the inauguration. It's 2021. And our country is becoming much more diverse, not just racially, but in opinions and ideas and lifestyles and cultures. And so it's really important that we have these conversations. Even though our country is becoming more diverse, there has been an increase in racism and bias incidents at all levels. And we'll talk about that. Also, we know that racism impacts students' achievement. And that's our goal, is to make sure we're supporting all students so that they can reach their post-secondary aspirations, see their true potential. And so if racism is getting in the way, we need to address it. The other reason I think it's important to have these conversations is because talking about race and culture and blending with people in our society from different backgrounds, it helps us all grow. I've had some of the best experiences in my life because I'm sharing it with people from different backgrounds, and I'm growing and I'm learning, and it makes for a more welcoming school environment and society. And so I also have the graphic down here showing that majority of school counselors in our country are white. And not saying that white counselors can't do this work, but I want to also, again, highlight that for a lot of students of color, seeing someone who looks like you, having that mirror, having someone you can talk to about some of the traumas and struggles you've experienced in your life that may understand a little bit more, that can be helpful to when you have someone who represents the same population of you racially. But not saying that white educators can't do the work. So I also want us to think about, even during this pandemic, again, the time we're in as we're doing this work, why it's needed, why we need to think about students and families from underrepresented populations. Because we're in a pandemic, we've navigated political turbulence and insurrections, and we've navigated major racial incidents in our country. And the pandemic is impacting people in our country differently. So I'm using a storm analogy. So the pandemic, racism, political uprising in our country, those are the storms we're navigating. But that storm is being navigated by some of us in different ships. So as you can see, the pandemic's impacting people differently based on race. And you can see the charts there below. Food insecurities. People of color are facing more food insecurities. So that means being hungry, not sure where your next meal is going to come from. That's something for us to be mindful of when we're working with our students. Even a household income, just families that are losing their jobs. Right now, there's a higher percentage of our families from of color that are losing their jobs. And so then also looking at the pandemic, who it's impacting. And it is impacting, and we're talking globally, but also this data shares in here in New York, who's being impacted by the pandemic more. And even the data for New York shows that it's our families of color and our families in certain regions that are being impacted more. So it's important for us to be aware that some families and some people who are in the same pandemic, navigating the same storm, may not have the same privileges. And I have to be aware of that myself as an educator. As I'm sitting here working behind a computer in the comforts of an office space, I have privileges too that I have to be aware of. Because I'm not saying like I'm balling or anything like that, but I know at the same time that we have families out there that are not sure where their next meal is coming from. They're not sure if they're going to be able to maintain their jobs, and they've had more people in their family impacted from COVID. And it tends to be our low-income families and our families of color. So I think it's important that we're aware of that as we're working with our students. And so I also want to highlight, as we're getting to this space, the goal is to be proactive. And we've had many occasions in our country over the past year where we could be proactive as educators with having conversations around race and around politics. And I know a lot of us, when you go into the profession or even socially, people say, whatever you do, don't talk about race, don't talk about religion, don't talk about politics. And even within the past year, these are some of the key topics that keep coming up. And so asking yourself, reflecting as you're looking at your practice, what was your response with your coworkers and even with students in the death of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd? How was that? Was it an opportunity that you decided to have conversations, or was it a silent moment? I'm here in Minneapolis, and so it happened right here in our streets in our district. There's a picture there where it shows the Target area that was burnt down, and we have a school, South High School in Minneapolis, less than a half mile away, or about a half mile away from where that was. And so our students watched it live on TV. They saw these events unfold. And then also imagine what they're feeling, their thoughts. Think about even the insurrection on the 6th. Students were watching. And so I think it's important to start reflecting, what is your institution doing when these things happen? How are you responding? And I know sometimes people are not sure, how do I respond? What words do I say? And so I think that's something to start thinking about. How can you get support to do some of that work? I want to also we're going to watch a brief video, because I think it's important that we're aware of how students are feeling when these events happen and why it's important to have these conversations. So we're going to watch this video, and students are going to talk about how they felt and reasons why they wanted to have the conversation.
Speaking with students and a local teacher who say,
New 10, turning the chaos at the U.S. Capitol into a teaching moment. State Superintendent Kathy Hoffman has encouraged educators to discuss the situation with their students. But are those discussions actually happening?
our Nicole Valdez speaking with students and a local teacher who say, in large part, that answer is no.
Many Americans still reeling, still asking questions about the attack on the U.S. Capitol.
What particular moments or images stood out to you?
These Valley High School students have similar questions, concerns, and fears, but for some, this was the first time they'd been asked.
The man wearing a Camp Auschwitz sweater. Like, I'm a Jewish American. So, I mean, that really hurt me. That hurt my family.
A group of 6 students from Scottsdale, Gilbert, Chandler, and other school districts spent their after-school hours online together to open up a discussion many of them have been wanting to have.
I was like, what has happened to this country?
But haven't been able to at school.
As much as my English teacher wanted to talk about it, he couldn't, because the school was so restrictive on it. They said that you're not allowed to talk about any politics.
I felt like I still was concerned and scared, but like they kind of just brushed over it.
Glendale teacher Elise Viescas.
What I noticed amongst a lot of my fellow educators was this fear of facing professional disciplinary action. I absolutely understand those fears. I think there is a way to have those conversations in factually accurate ways that allow for that sensitivity.
And it hasn't been easy for many.
We're already going through so many changes and having to experience a lot of real world issues. We can't pretend everything is normal.
To see, Confederate flags being waved and, anti-Semitic remarks and just awful, awful things.
This is what they wanted, to have these important conversations to help shape their future, their understanding as they soon become voters and leaders of tomorrow.
Avoiding conversation is kind of a setup for failure, like later in life.
It kind of desensitizes them. And I feel like seeing these events kind of just make it more of a normality.
We need to talk about it in school. It's not good for our mental health, and it could affect our academic performance.
Teachers like Viescas advocating for the space in schools to do so.
You are all being very much affected, same as the adults, by the events around us. And in that impact, processing it and speaking your truth and being heard and being understood matters.
Nicole Valdez, ABC 15, Arizona.
All right. And so, so as we're watching that video, and I want to make sure folks were able to hear it, I would imagine someone would say something in the chat if they couldn't. Awesome, great. So as you're watching that video, and as I was thinking, as a school counselor here in Minneapolis, because this is our work, this is our connectedness. We love thinking about our students, caring about them, protecting them. And so when incidents happen globally, or even in the school when there's major incidents that happen, students definitely have a reaction to it. They're not too young to have conversations. And so I think it's important for us to be aware as educators, what gets in the way of having these conversations, because the students are ready to have these conversations. They're being exposed to social media and they're being exposed to different news outlets. So it's important and they're also having conversations with each other. And so it's really important that we're helping them learn the skills to process things, because when these major incidents happen in our society, not only does it impact students socially, but it impacts them how they feel emotionally and how they navigate school. And so it's important for us to have these conversations, and something that the students even shared that they're interested in. And so I want to just give a couple strategies for school-wide ways to engage when incidents occur. And so this is and definitely it's important to have something proactive. If you haven't had anything put together yet, it's really important to have ways that you want to show up and talk about these incidents with students. So making sure you make the connection to history, make sure that you're proactively disrupting systemic oppression when it comes up or when someone says something. And then also some other things to be mindful of is being proactive versus reactive. We're educators. The old model of school counseling was reactive, of saying, you know what, we'll just wait and see what happens. We'll stay in our offices. But the new school counselor, the professional school counselor is proactive. If you know that the data is showing you that there's been incidents going on in our country, or that in your own school building, that's your needs assessment. Let's start doing that work early to have these conversations and resources to prepare. And so those are some things to be mindful of. I wanted to call us to be proactive in this work. And so some of you might be saying, well, why is it that we have to address racism and politics in schools? Why in the world is this something that's now on our plate? And so first of all, I want to share that that's something that's always been on for us as school counselors, is to have these spaces in schools, to normalize the space to talk about uncomfortable things. And so I know as a school counselor, this is something that I noticed, especially after when I was working in schools about 4 years ago, and watching how politics and racism in our country started to blend. I would see and hear things that students heard on TV or through politics in schools. And there was so many reports that came out about some of those incidents in schools that were occurring based off of things happening in our society. And so it's really important that we're aware of that information, that data, especially in the time that we're in right now. And I see us as school counselors as the key engines to our country to build cross-cultural relationships, help kids be able to see each other through a different lens instead of through a racist or biased lens. That's our job. And I'm so excited that we get the opportunity to do it. And it's needed now more than ever. So it's important for us to be aware. And I want to make sure that I'm sharing transparently and being vulnerable today around just different factors that influence our perspectives on race and how we connect with other people. I know one of the biggest factors historically in our country is just the way our country was formed, the foundation of it, steeped in racism, whether it was slavery back starting at the beginning of our country's foundation. And then racism began to mutate from slavery into segregation. And then not only just African Americans and Blacks in our country, but we had people of so many different backgrounds that have been discriminated against. So I think it's really important for us to know the history of racism in our country and how it impacts us socially. Also our families, our upbringing, what messaging you're told, who's in your circle. Those things really do play a role on how you view race, how you connect with people. Also the school and communities that you're in. Historically, our country was developed in a way where people were segregated. So neighborhoods and communities didn't have a chance to blend cross-culturally, cross-racially. And so it's important to know some of how the isolation has gotten us here, how the segregation and racism has gotten us here. I want us to do a quick I want us to do a quick activity. And this activity that we're going to do will help you just get an idea of just the different folks in your circle. And so it's a chance for us to think about just forming our circle. Who are we in community with? And so simply, I want you to think about people in your life, the people who are maybe the closest 7 to 10 people in your life. So just think about them, who they are, their names, and I'll pull up. You get to watch me do it live because I restarted my computer before we started and forgot to re-pull it up. But I'm going to pull up a document that we're going to do an activity. So if you can grab something, write down the people in your life, the closest, I'd say 7 to 8 people in your life. And this activity is called Top 10. And so here you'll see the list of people. So go ahead and make a list of the people that are closest to you in your life. And then I know some of you see here age. If you know the ages of the people that are closest to you in your life, go ahead and share. Write down what their ages are. If you don't know their age, maybe you can share if they're older, younger, middle age. So sharing the ages. And these are the people who are the closest people in your life. People who you're like, hey, these are the people that are close to me. Maybe the people who you're like, hey, these are the safe people that I'll spend time with during the pandemic. So after you put down their age, write down if they're able-bodied or have abled or have any disability. So it could be visual, maybe not be able to see. It could be maybe a physical disability. Maybe it could be a cognitive. Just thinking about the people in your circle. And if you don't know, it's okay if you leave it blank, and maybe you can talk to them about it since you all are close. Next, think about the people in your circle. What's their first language? So what's the first language of people in your circle? Is it English? Is it Spanish? Is it sign language? What's the first language for people in your circle?
Somebody put that in, and I like to see his reaction.
English and Yiddish.
Yiddish.
Next is race and ethnicity. If you know what's the race or ethnicity of the people in your circle, African American, Korean, Hispanic, thinking about their race or ethnicity. And also be mindful that some people have multiple races or multiple ethnicities. And so feel free to be mindful of that and share the multiple ethnicities or races that the people in your circle may have. Next is sexual orientation. Think about the sexual orientation of people in your circle. Are the people in your circle that identify as gay or straight or as lesbian listed there? Then we'll have the last one be, I'll share with you the last couple. People in your circle, their religious background. If they have a faith background or a belief background, whether it's Christian or if they may not have one, they might be atheist or they may not know, or they might be Muslim. I think having an idea of writing it down. Do you know folks in your circle? Idea of their religious background. Who's in your circle? And then the last two would be education level. And then location. People in your circle, as far as location, are they in the city area? Are they more in a rural area? Is it more of a suburb? What part of your state do do the people in your circle live in? So you should have a list of people who are in your circle and different identities. And so as you're reflecting on those identities, I'll just share a little bit, and feel free if you want to share in the chat anything you notice about the people in your circle and their different identities. This activity is designed to help you get an idea. And when I did it, it gave me just a chance to have some more humility, because I remember doing it and I felt almost like, oh man, like everyone in my circle, I saw the different patterns and I said, okay, majority of my circle, everyone in my circle is straight, everyone in my circle identified as Christian. And so I started to think, and not saying it's a bad thing with the people who are in my circle, I started thinking about, well, what are some patterns of maybe people who are not represented in my circle? And so starting to think about what's my proximity to other people's stories? How am I aware of people who are may not have the same identities as me? And so I started thinking about my students. Goodness, I have students that are Muslim. What's been my history of learning about students who are Muslim, the culture and their belief? And I started thinking like, well, how about I start thinking about what are some areas that I can grow in, since I don't have that naturally in my circle. And so I think it's important also when you do this activity, I know I hustle through it. Sometimes people might feel defensive, like, oh man, I don't have representation in all the different areas. I hope you see this as more of an opportunity to think about how can you be intentional about learning about other people's lenses and perspectives, and seeing that sometimes as humans, we have our circles with people who are really similar to us. And so I hope you're able to get that from the activity. What I want to also do is be mindful of understanding bias. And I know that when we don't have connections with people who are that we're familiar with, who we have similarities with, that sometimes it may lead to bias. And I usually show a video that demonstrates that bias. And I think it's also important that we're aware of biases in our schools. And it can be a variety. And I want to be vulnerable too, and just share that there's times where I had to do that work of being honest about my own biases and microaggressions towards students. And so I started my career at North High in Minneapolis. And after my time at North High, I ended up going to Champlain Park High School. And I realized when I got to Champlain Park, the climate, the environment was different. The social economic statuses of the students were higher. And I remember my first couple weeks being in awe that there's kids in the parking lot with Mercedes-Benz and Range Rovers. And I drive my 2008 Dodge Avenger, and I remember these biases I would have in my mind though about the students who were affluent. And it usually was white students. And I remember one of the students, he parked in the lot right beside me, and I didn't even know he was my student till later on. And I remember all the biases I had. Said, man, this rich kid, I bet his parents bought his car. He probably doesn't work. And I remember just sitting there thinking those things. And then come to find out, I get a pass for a student coming to see me as the same kid. And I remember as he's sitting down, I was like, oh yeah, in my mind, I was like, oh, I remember him. And I had to fight the biases that I had, thinking like, oh, this rich kid, what could he possibly want me to help him with? Little did I know he was coming in talking about some of the stressors he was navigating in his life and anxiety. And thank goodness I was able to realize I can't have that biases towards this student. I need to realize I struggle with anxiety as well. How can I understand and be human with the student? And so I think it's really important for us as educators to be intentional around that. So it's important to think about who's marginalized in your schools, who's been marginalized historically. Where does it show up in your schools? Sometimes it's staff interactions, maybe it's student interactions. Sometimes it's systemic, and we're going to talk about systemic in a little bit. And making sure we're capturing the feedback from students and hearing about them when they say they experience some of these situations in schools, the biases. And I'm being vulnerable because I'm working on it. I know some of you may have other areas that are your tough spots. I shared about mine as socioeconomics. That's one of them. And I'm making sure I'm aware of it. And you know what? There was a time I struggled. I had to realize that I had bias when I was scheduling students, and it was usually gender bias. And so I had to be aware of, why am I scheduling all the boys in outdoor adventures and team sports? And then when the girls are asking for what classes are open, I'm like, oh yeah, sewing or home ec or cooking. And those are biases. What could be your spot? I know some, especially in the climate we're in right now, some people, it could be politics, where you have a bias towards students and people in your community around that, or it could be immigration or religion. Those are things that divide us, not just as a school, but a community. And it doesn't lend to us building bridges with students. And so it's important for us to call out those times where we might see racism in our school systems. And we're going to talk about some of these coming up. And so I also want to make sure that we're aware that having conversations around race with students and kids is something that we should be very intentional about. My daughter, her name is Grace. I showed a picture of her earlier. I love that girl so much. And she is 19 months, and my daughter's biracial. Her mom is white, African-American. And so being aware of how raising a child, especially in our country right now, and being aware of what they notice, what they see, is never too young to talk about race with kids, especially as you're thinking about elementary age when they come in, knowing the data, as you can see here, kids 3 to 5 years old not only can categorize people by race, but express bias based on race. So it's important for you to be aware of that. And usually it's tending to having positive traits and desires to connect with people who look like you. I noticed even my daughter, my brother looks similar to me. And so she clings onto him. When I leave the room, sometimes she'll go and cling onto him. And she's always been like that with him. And just noticing already skin tones and stuff like that. And it's important. You might even have little kids who start getting curious to say, hey, why is their skin color like that? So now that we know that kids are able to understand and see race, it's on us as adults to help them know how to have those kinds of conversations. I also want to make sure that, as I'm jumping around here, that when we're talking about strategies to talk about race with kids, we use some of these basic strategies. These are some things that I wanted to share with you all briefly that dovetails with the previous slide. And so it's important that you're aware that it takes modeling. It's one thing to say that you want kids to learn about race, but it's a much different thing to do the work modeling yourself. And so I'm going to show a quick video that helps with understanding why it's important to talk about race with kids and give some strategies. And hopefully my elementary folks in here, it's so important because you set the groundwork. So shout out to the elementary counselors that are in here.
Subjects you don't really want to get into because you're afraid you might mess up. But the fact is that as early as 3 years old, children are classifying people based on their appearances. And so the worst conversation adults can have with kids about race is no conversation at all. Talking to kids about race needs to happen early, often, and honestly. Saying honestly, yeah, people are different, cultures are different, but that's a good thing. How boring would it be to have a crayon box that all had the same color? There are so many ways to approach racial conversations. You can use Dr. Seuss books, you can use any sort of pop culture reference. There are many, many movies, animated movies especially, that form a good entryway. So it's helpful, especially as a parent, to watch the movie beforehand maybe, or read a plot summary and say, well, what's happening here? Or look at all the other princesses. What do you notice about them? Do you think anyone can be a princess? Do they have to have a certain skin color or look a certain way? And it's usually good to sort of stop along the way, pause 2 or 3 times strategically, and bring up this conversation. Kids, just like adults, don't just respond to words. So this isn't just quote unquote talking to your kids about race. This is actually experiential learning that we need to do. I remember taking a class to the Lorraine Motel where Dr. King was assassinated. And when young people see that, that impacts them. And then we can use that experience, that hands-on, visceral encounter with race and racism to have a much more substantive conversation, and it feels different. And you can do that in your own local city. There are historical markers, those signs you pass all the time and never read. Stop and read them one day. See what they say, see what happened there, see if you recognize the names, or if you don't, go and look them up. Utilize all the resources around you and make sure that you're not just talking to your kids about race and diversity and justice, but you're showing them why it's important. Racism is detrimental to the entire society, no matter if you're Black or white, Latino, Asian, Native, whomever. Everyone is impacted, and that's why we need to raise a generation of people that's going to turn around and try to change that momentum toward the tide of anti-racism and racial justice.
Cool. Glad I could share that video with you all, because it is beyond important that we are able to have conversations about race with kids. And I take this seriously because I feel this is our role as school counselors, as educators, to heal our country. And even starting at that young age, it's a chance to undo some of those biases that they may get at an early age. And I am aware of that as a parent. And I'm doing things to protect my daughter already, because if I can be vulnerable, there's times where we've had even family members that have said racist comments where I'm like, oh no, I got to protect my girl around that. And I think I have that lens coming in as a school counselor for students, where I want to protect them and help them understand too around how they can be ready to have conversations and engage and see each other's from a lens of, hey, I want to know more about your background, about your culture, knowing how to speak up when they hear or see things going on. And so again, as educators, is not just talking about it, it's also having the actions. Kids are watching. And I also want to share about the practice of cultural humility, because taking a look at this, it really does take some humility for us as educators to grow and knowing how to do this work, because I'm sharing a lot of different things around ask to grow in your skill set and grow in how you connect and view students. And I know what gets in the way is sometimes the term competence, where there comes a point where people feel like they've arrived. They know all the skills that it takes to be a good counselor or educator. They went to this training and they're like, hey, I'm good now. I got the cultural training, or I'm on the SEL team, or I'm on the equity team, so I'm good. I think it's really important to see this work from a cultural humility perspective, where you're saying, you know what? I'm always going to work on myself. I'm going to work on how I see students, on my practices. What groups of students do I not know enough about? What are some areas of weaknesses that I have? And I know that I have them. And if you know there's certain things, maybe things growing up, maybe comments that were said that you're like, oh man, what are some of the things I think about? What are some things I didn't know that those are things that are harmful? Or what are some areas you just haven't been able to really connect with students cross-culturally? It's a way to grow and connect, and students realize it. They can tell when we're using humility. And so I want to give you some sentence starters when talking about humility. Some ways to use humility is saying, hey, you know what? I've not experienced what you're talking about before. Can you tell me more about what that feels like? Can you help me understand? Or even saying something like, hey, to be honest, I did not have an environment like that for me growing up. Tell me more about that. And I think it's important to get comfortable when you've had times where you're like, you know what? I made a mistake here. I want to grow. Help me understand. That humility goes so far. It helps build relationships. And also it helps me to be able to stop and examine, how am I looking at students? How am I viewing them? How am I really looking at them? Do I look at students? Do I have favorites in my eyes that I'm not aware of? Because I know naturally students of color, African-American boys, oh my goodness, I'm like, I see you as sons. I see you as someone who I could play basketball with. We have natural affinities. But how am I showing humility to try to understand and connect with students who are different from me, who have different backgrounds or experiences or family backgrounds or religious experiences or cultural experiences? I want to have the humility to get to know students of different backgrounds. It's been amazing. I love having those opportunities. After school clubs where we're spending time listening to music or cooking together. I love cooking club at schools because I get to ask students questions about what their home is like. What are meals like? What are some of your family's cultural dishes? Those are ways to start to engage and learn, and students open up. Our students of color love having those opportunities to share who they are and feel validated. And so it's also important for us to be aware of how to speak up when we see racism in schools. These are different areas where we see it, hallways, lunchrooms, social media. And so it's one of those things where I think it's really important that we're aware of how it's shown up in our schools and how can we combat racism? How can we call it out? Especially as we have incidents occur in our country, it's important that we're aware of steps to combat racism. Here in Minnesota, it's something that we've been seeing quite a bit. Students are sharing stories about racism that they've experienced, whether it was in high school in the past, or students that are in school now are sharing about incidents that they've had negative things said, racist things said to them, done to them. And I think it's important for us to listen to students and hear their stories and find ways to bridge those gaps, because there are gaps in our country right now. It's important that we have these conversations and we help students see the similarities in themselves and in others and how we can connect them. So this is more information from Minnesota. So what I want to do is have us now, for the remaining of the time, think about the reading that you had to begin with. And the reading was called, that you looked through, the article called A Crooked Seat at the Table, Black and Alone in Honors Class. And that reading was designed for you to start thinking about how can we support our students from underrepresented populations into higher level classes. And I wanted to end with sharing some of this information because I know from my own experience growing up, I was usually one of the few students of color in my higher level class. And when I was in college, I was one of the few students of color in my classes. And knowing what that feels like to be in college settings or the one higher level class I took in high school, what that felt like, feeling that isolation. Man, am I smart enough? Knowing that I felt nervousness, and I used these moments to grow and learn. And I also connected with students as a school counselor to hear from them and offer them ways of support to release some of the anxieties or stressors they have as they're preparing to be into higher level classes. So we're going to talk a little bit about some strategies, but first I want you to consider some of these things from the reading. So if you work in elementary schools, it looks a little different than high school. And I share this because I want you to get an understanding of these different things for your school, some questions to ask, to inquire about yourself. What are some things in your practice from that reading? Who are the underrepresented students in your building? It's not always racially. It might be students who live in a certain area of town. Or I've even noticed it where there's times where certain higher level classes has more girls than boys or more boys than girls. So making sure you're looking at who are the underrepresented people in there. It might be sometimes students who have other types of accommodations, who may be doing well academically, but not provide the opportunity to be in higher level classes. It might be your students who speak English as a second language. So it's important to think about all those factors. Think about your data. Who's not represented in your higher level classes right now? So I think it's important for us to not only support students to go ahead and take higher level classes, but be aware of some of the things that students navigate when they do take these higher level classes. And so there are barriers. There's times where students from underrepresented populations have shared with me their worries and anxieties of taking higher level classes. And as school counselors and educators that want them to reach their highest potential and attain post-secondary, it's important for us to know about some of these barriers. They include not being told about the opportunities for higher level classes, worrying about their GPA. I know a lot of students are like, well, my GPA is good. I don't want to risk it. Worrying about what other students would think about them and the social climate and how they feel in that space. So I'm going to share with you a student as she talks about some of the just her journey even getting into a higher level class as a transfer student. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video and then have you think about your students how we can eliminate these type of experiences for our students as they would navigate going to higher level classes.
And I was getting like really good grades, nothing less than like a 95. And then when I came here, they originally put me like an extra help for math and English. And I would constantly, like, at least once a week, would have to go and speak to the counselor because I'm like, I don't belong in these classes. Like, you see my grades, you have my transcript. I don't need any of this. And it took me a while to like convince them to take me out of those classes as well as try to get into harder classes because all the classes they had me in, like the regular math, was stuff I'd already done. So it took me, I was finally able to transfer out of like the extra help for English and math, but they're like, let's just see like how you do in these classes. And they kept me in those classes. And it got to a point where I was like, you know what, I'm tired of having to talk to them. I didn't like really want to trouble my parents with it. And I know they have, like, they can speak English, but like it would be hard for them to like try to talk with the counselor and stuff. And I didn't want to like burden them or anything. So like I myself just stopped trying. But luckily, Miss Sherney, she worked in the high school and she knew my older sister, and she like saw me in the library and she started talking to me, and I told her about what was going on, and she's like, you know what, I'll take care of it. And she took care of it. She went and talked to the counselors, and within like a week or two, I was transferred into the classes that I needed to be in.
Okay.
If Hispanic kids or if anyone looks at any video.
And so I think it's important that we hear those stories from students and understand from them what it's like as they journey into higher level classes. I really feel that we can do some of this work as educators to support students as they navigate into higher level classes. We can support them when they get there. I'm going to offer some of those strategies now as we close, to wrap up. So I like thinking in terms of tiers. So how can you be effective in recruiting and retaining students from underrepresented populations? School-wide, tier 1 would be having those current students of color or students from underrepresented populations, and it could be students of color, it could be your students who speak English as a second language, it could be it could be the boys that are in the classes, there could be the girls, whoever's underrepresented. Make sure that you're using the current students in that class to talk to potential students. To say, hey, I'm in this class. Guess what? The school counselor said you'd be probably good for this class. Hey, let me tell you about it. Have a family night. Share that with the families. Have them understand, hey, this is an opportunity for your students. We want them to be in this program. Have student panels. That's been one of the best things that I've done as a school counselor, is having student panels. And also when I was at Champlain Park, we did something called mini sessions where students can test out for 7 minutes in the day. We had students do a mock schedule and go try out future classes they'd like to be scheduled for. And then there was a space for higher level classes for them to go and ask questions. Do that in your school because that helps alleviate some of the anxiety students have. It's so important to have small group spaces for students when you put them in, students from underrepresented populations, when you put them in higher level classes. Creating spaces for them to get support, to get some help, to make sure that, hey, I do have a study group. I know I'm new to this group. I'm new to this class. I might not know everyone who's in this higher level class, but I have a study group. Also, I've been intentional about even having students scheduled together. I know some people are like, oh my goodness, we have scheduling policies. I would break the rules and say, you know what? If there's a student who feels that there's someone who they share an affinity with, that'll help them feel connected in that class. And when I was at Champlain Park, it would be our Black female students who would say, man, if there's another Black girl that's gonna be in a higher level class, can you put us together? And they said, you know, sometimes just hear me out. It's hard they would, and I would encourage them, make sure you connect with all the kids of different background. And sometimes it'd just be easier to have at least one person that looks like you in that space to say, all right, I can make connection with other people. I got someone here that I can connect with too. Understanding that for students, that's a real thing. But also I think using those spaces to build those cross-cultural connections. And I think also the tier 1 individual counseling approaches, that's us as school counselors. How can we connect with students and affirm them that they belong in those higher level classes? How can we continue to provide them support while they're navigating those spaces? Giving them ongoing support, checking in. And then the last piece is talking to the school, talking to the teacher, because we have to make those spaces inclusive. Oftentimes students of color have shared that when they're in those higher level classes, they feel like they're asked to answer questions people turn to them like, hey, do you think this is true? Or when they feel at times that people might think, do you belong here? Are you sure you're in the right class? Students have shared that. And there's students who don't feel confident when you walk into a space and you're already questioned or doubted. So it's important that we speak up for students, that we share with them, hey, you belong in there. I love speaking into students and letting them know, I know you're going to pass this class. Some things for data review, it's important. I like to focus on data and making sure you're continuing to review the data annually around who's in those higher level classes, who's not in there, what progress you're making. And then the last piece I want to share is summer melt. It's impacting students right now tremendously, especially at the place we're at in our country. So please be aware of some of the things we can do coming up to support our students as they do post-secondary applications, especially if their hearts are already set to do the application, to go to a post-secondary. Let's try to help put in bridges throughout the summer so that they can make it to their post-secondary options. Especially during this time, students from underrepresented populations face the stressor of, do I leave home to go to college? Money's tight right now. Family members might have been hurt or died from the pandemic. I want to stay here to protect and be with my family. So it's important that we're able to help create strategies and systems that help students that are struggling to be represented in post-secondary, that they get that support. So I know that we covered a ton today. And so I want to make sure to pause so that we can answer questions, but please be reflecting on how you can improve your school environment, especially in this time. How can you transfer the things we talked about today? Hopefully you took notes. Hopefully you're comfortable there. Hopefully you enjoyed your snacks. And so think about how you can make some changes and improvement. So I'm going to pause sharing my screen now so that we can take questions. And I haven't been able to see the chat yet, so I have no clue what anyone's saying. I feel like I've been talking at you all for the past hour. So I want to pause and listen.
There's some really good stuff, Mr. Francis, and it's like your hair is like right on time with all this other stuff that's been happening. But Bob is the one that looks at the chat, and he will pick out a couple of questions or a couple of comments.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, they're coming in pretty fast. Will the presentation be made to us afterwards? That's always a question. They will be,
right?
Yeah, they want your PowerPoint, so you have to send it to me.
Okay, I sure can.
And they'll want your contact information. I will share that with them.
Yeah, for sure.
How can educators, counselors, K-12 create equitable and anti-racist teaching is going up practices and learning environments so that students have the safety to learn in the comfort of their own skin?
Yeah. So someone's asking what strategies to help engage that kind of learning in schools?
Yes.
Cool. Whoever that person is, I want to high five you through the screen because now we're doing bonus material. And I was hoping someone, what was that?
Hector Meza.
Hector, I'm high fiving you, man, because I was hoping someone would ask that question and I came prepared for it. Thank you, Hector. I wish I could hug you virtually because I was like, please let someone ask. And so what we're doing in Minneapolis, because it's been so transformative, is having lessons where we're talking about race, starting at the early elementary level. So this is a book called The Color of Us, and we put it together as a lesson and we're going to be doing this one coming up again in a couple of weeks, where we're having kids have conversations about race and helping them be able to have the talk about who they are, what cultural and racial background they come from. And so we start at the elementary level where you're talking about, hey, today, and that's my little cutie right there, Grace. And I read this book to her too. And this is how I did it with her. What's a shade? What's colors? That's what we're going to learn about today. And so what I did, I even got the stuff I used for the lesson where you have elementary kids and you talk.
Mr. Francis, I hate to interrupt, but could you save that for your next presentation?
You got excited? I got excited. Yes, I'll answer questions, but man, I'll send the lesson out because I was ready to go. Sorry, you got me pumped. That's my favorite. I love leading lessons. Who else has a question?
Let's see. Let me scroll down a little bit. How do you have uncomfortable conversations with teachers who are over-identifying our students?
Yeah. And when you say, and so that's one of those things where I think it starts with I think schools have to create that environment where you can have those conversations. Because I think if you're midway through the school year and those things are happening, and when I've worked with staff where I can tell someone's being over-identified, or I think not only that, the data shows it. You pull up data around fails, disaggregate it. You pull up. So I think it's important that your school has a system in place to have those kinds of conversations where you're having that accountability in your data. So even in Minneapolis, we'll stop and look at the data and we'll say, hey, let's disaggregate this data by race, graduation rates, and it looks different. And then discipline rates. We have those conversations. Who's being sent out? Why? What's going on here? Who's being referred to for special ed? Who's not represented in our higher level classes? Let's stop and pause. So then you get into that pattern of having those conversations. So I think it really, and that's something that we value, we do in Minneapolis. And I know it can be uncomfortable, especially for me as a leader, having to have conversations about race, and I'm a person of color. Sometimes people will feel that defensively, like, oh shoot, the black guy in the room is talking about race. But making sure we get to that pattern where we're building a trust with our staff. We're coming at it with humility to say, you know what, I want to grow and learn. I might have made a mistake in how I was pulling up the data. Help me understand. That's how we build. That's how I've gotten so much closer with people and colleagues from having those types of conversations. So I hope your school facilitates spaces like that.
I'm sorry, Derek, I have a question I want to ask you.
Yeah.
So I'm a high school counselor at a school in the South Bronx. And first of all, I love your presentation today. I thought everything was spot on and it was great and your energy is awesome.
Thank you.
But a lot of what you're discussing at my school, we have 100% students of color. Like everybody is black and brown across the board in my entire school. And it's been like that since I've been there. It's just the nature of the demographics of the community. The concern that I have is not so much because we do have like AP classes, and naturally, since everybody's black and brown, all the kids in those classes are black and brown too. So we have really high success rates like with our data, but the concern that I have is not so much having those conversations with the students and trying to make them feel welcome or at ease. It's more trying to have those conversations with the staff, because you have staff that's very comfortable having those conversations and it's not frowned upon by my admin. But you have some staff that's like, I'm just sticking to my curriculum. I'm not dealing with anything that's like social, emotional related or putting me in a funny situation because I don't really relate to any of these kids. So the problem that I'm having with the equality discussion is like, because my school has created a diversity and equity action team as a result, and I'm on that, but trying to get the staff to, I don't want to say like buy in, but trying to educate them. And it's frustrating because I know somebody in the chat earlier today said something about in their global class, they had a discussion, but my entire history department, like all the teachers are white. And what's crazy is that where they have probably, I think, the English and the history departments have an easier opportunity to incorporate these discussions in their curriculum. Like when we've had these discussions as a staff through the diversity and equity action team, one of the history teachers was like, do we still have to talk about this? Like, that's a problem. But then you do projects with the kids on like their own immigration background stories and you welcome that. But then as a staff, you're like, do we still have to talk about this? So like, how do you do that work in terms of trying to get the staff to be educated? Because the kids grow up like in the South Bronx, it's all black and brown. They're comfortable in that environment. If anything, their discomfort is when they go to college, because that's the first time they really come into contact with so many white people. But within the school community, how do you work with the staff like that? Who wants to be like, oh, I don't see color, or I'm not comfortable talking about color.
And that question right there is it's so real because and as you were sharing, the kids know, the kids can tell. That's the first thing. They know who they can talk to about certain things. They know who they can talk about race and culture with, and and that's the thing, they even know who they're like, they know which teachers they don't even acknowledge that. And then you know what? That starts with looking at the staff, looking at the who you're bringing in, who you're recruiting and retaining. Because what I've also noticed is a lot of my white colleagues, they haven't had those opportunities in their own life. Then, like how we did that circle activity earlier, a lot of them haven't had that opportunity where there's people in their own circle of different backgrounds. So they haven't built up that comfort level. Or if they do, maybe it's just a colleague, a coworker. And so you're now asking people who have never really had cross-cultural conversations or cross-racial conversations in their life to do that with kids. And not only that, the thing I know, especially because when I worked at in Minneapolis, North High is where I was at. It's just like your school, all students of color, all Black and brown kids. And I realized the kids had more knowledge about race than the adults. I was like, the kids, they're on it. And so I remember the kids, they're ready for those kind of conversations. So we need to encourage our administrators to tell the students or tell the staff, you need to work, you need to grow in your ability to have this conversation as an adult. So creating opportunities for them to reflect on what was it like growing up? What messaging were you told? Let's be real about it. Because we got to acknowledge in our country, some people are still being told to see people from different backgrounds as less than them, as not as good, as they deserve to get beat up like that, as they shouldn't be in our country. There's people who are being told like, oh, they're not. And so helping the adult SEL, because I think that's hindering our students, because those beliefs that they have, they put that onto how they think students can perform in school, how well they'll do because of those biases. You put and I gotta be honest, there was a time I did that. When I went from North to Champlain Park, you know, I would, if you thought, you would have thought this Champlain Park was all Black students, because all my students come in the office were Black students. And I had to remove that lens of seeing like, oh, I only want to bring in the Black students. So all of us have to keep doing that work. I remember I have biases where I prefer students who are athletes. I'd be like, oh, they play basketball? Then I had to be like, no. Kids who are in band, let me bring you in here. Let me learn about you. So I think educators need to have that heart for knowing students who are different from them, especially racially, because especially in the times we're in right now. So I'm giving you a long answer, but I think especially when you're working with people who have been marginalized, getting to know their experiences. What has happened? What does your life look like? And so those are some of the ways I know here in Minneapolis, we do professional development around that. And I would encourage you to find some real professional development. I have contact information I can share with you.
I would love that.
I sure will. Okay. Because it's a game changer for your students. I love when students feel like, okay, like, especially I've seen staff transformation too. Staff where I'm like, okay, like they come in the beginning of the year, you're like, dang, they don't even know how to have a conversation about this. And later they get comfortable. So it's accepting the journey to say, hey, I don't know certain things, but I want to grow. So that's my super long answer. But I'm glad I want to connect. I put my email in the chat, and my social media. I would love to connect more with whoever's interested.
I think Madeline has a comment.
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Hi, Derek. This is my second time in a webinar that you have hosted. So thank you. You have a groupie in me.
Cool. Hi.
Alexandra, I just wanted to just kind of comment on something that is sort of working in my school. I'm also at a high school, 30 minutes from the Bronx. I'm in Ossining High School, and I'm also part of the equity committee at my school now for like 4 years. And along with the equity committee that was created, we also created a student equity committee. And one of the ways that I've seen that it's working, it's not perfect, is just like you, I always felt that when we had these equity committees that were open to all, the people around that table weren't the ones that we wanted around that table, right? But when we started the student equity committee during faculty time, we had these students do teach-ins, and same message, but when it's from the students, it is heard so much differently.
Yes, I agree.
And a lot of they prepared their lessons, their surveys, and then they also prepared the findings. And a lot of the like inequities in AP and higher level classes were how they feel were in these classes were brought up. And we did get some resistance, and I think you'll always get resistance, right? Why are we doing this again and all this stuff? So we have continued that. I mean, we now are doing it on drop-in student teach-ins through Google Meets, and we do a morning period and an afternoon period where teachers can drop in. It is the message is out there in an email for everybody, and topics led by students are put out, and we've been doing it now monthly, and it's growing in attendance, and I'm feeling hopeful that the message is getting out to the masses. So if that hasn't been created, it's something that maybe you can look into in your school of the same equity committee, but now the student version of it.
Yeah.
Can you put your contact information in the chat, please? Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes, I love y'all energy too. Like honestly, the vibe, because this collective energy, this is how we help students see each other's humanity. You plant that seed. So if you're a kindergarten teacher out there or a counselor or admin, please invest in school counseling and invest in doing that work early. Because if kids are coming in with a bias already, you have to undo that bias. If you wait till middle school, high school to even start cracking into it, it just grows. And we see it in our society. You see it in grown adults. But not only that, you get people who become hard, their shell, where if you even talk about race, no, I'm uncomfortable. Don't talk about, no, I'm not like this. I got plenty of Black friends, And so, that's what we want to soften. We want to soften those hearts where they put the walls up, and we can help do it at an earlier age where they say, oh, yeah, we can have this conversation. You can teach them the skills. That's what we can do as school counselors. That's going to help heal our entire country, you guys. That's why I get excited, because I even try to model that with the kids here when I work at the elementary schools, and they do it. It's real. It's magical. It's beautiful seeing them talk about skin tone and show each other and say, oh, your skin's beautiful too. Tell me about your culture. Oh my goodness, especially y'all in New York, with all the different, oh my goodness, I would. Yeah, sorry, I'm getting excited.
I'm psyched. I'm already on your board. When we gonna start working, we gotta take this out. That's okay. I'm just curious. What happened on January 6th?
Yeah.
Have you had any students that would come or said anything? Did they understand what was going on? Especially with the Confederate flag going through the Capitol. So, you don't have to answer it, but I'm just like, was any of that,
yes,
or did you have questions about it?
Yeah. And that is, we have been addressing that. And I know schools across the country have, and we have here in Minneapolis too. And I want to share that it's a teaching moment that we can't run from. You gotta have the conversation with your kids, or else their minds are wandering. Or if you tell them you ain't gonna talk about it, that stops their curiosity. They wanna know. And so some quick strategies would be making sure to create the space. So maybe you bring it up and say, hey, did you see what happened? Did y'all see as a class? Did y'all see what happened on the news? What did y'all think? What were the conversations like at home? So giving those types of things. And I know for time's sake, the main thing is make sure you hold space to have the conversation, give them factual information, help them be global citizens where they can discern what's factual and what's not. So I can share strategies that we used here in Minneapolis. I can make those available too. Cause I think it's one of those things where you have to get in the pattern of, I hope that we don't have things come up again, but we don't know. So we'd rather be prepared. It's just like a fire drill. If you know, okay, we've had some fires this year, George Floyd, the election, the insurrection, those are major incidents. If you haven't prepared yet, you gotta be proactive. So those are just some things I'd like to share around that. Please be proactive and plan in case, because it's an emotional safety thing at that point. Cool. I'm having so much fun. Oh, go ahead, Bob.
No, I was gonna have got my Buffalo Bills hat on. Anyway, and it's warm. I'm thinking, Dr. Reed Barnett, it might be time to begin to wrap up.
Yes. Thank you, school counselors. I was looking through the chat, some great statements, some great ideas. We had counselors that were out of the state of New York, so I welcome those who came from far and near. We do webinars at least once or twice a month. We got one that's coming up. Mr. Francis, you were awesome, 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 awesome. And Bob and I have talked, and you will definitely be back.
Yes, I can't wait to come out there. I want to be there live too. I appreciate you all.
I just want to say our conference is in November, and hopefully we will be, in person. So
I love that.
We will definitely be in contact. But before then, we would love for you to come back and continue the conversation, because there's a lot of energy, a lot of knowledge, a lot of people want to know what's going on. And I think that you shared a lot, and I saw a lot of heads going up and down. So I'm quite sure people are going to take this information back to their schools. And yes, we as school counselors, we have to take the bull by the horn, and we have to do things in order for our students. And sometimes the principals can say, whatever they can say. And I know sometimes we're worried about our position, but we have to show them that data, numbers. And for some reason, educators love numbers. So just a thought, when you're putting your program together, maybe you can use that as part of, say, Mr. Principal, we need this because this, and that, and the rest. So again, thank you, Mr. Francis, for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Our next professional development will be Champ Camp 2.0. It's free. It's a counseling program, professional development, 5 sessions. It starts January 25th. The first session is the social emotional way. Check your email with NISCA website and the calendar for registration. And again, if you have any questions, kindly email them to the professional development at nisca.org. And I'd just like to thank everyone that came on board. We also had a couple of board members that I saw. Kathy Corbett, who's our publications as well as public relations person. Stacy Reed, I just have to give a shout out to you. And the reason why I'm giving you a shout out, because Stacy Reed's boss was Dr. Lester Young, and now he's our chancellor. So shout out to you. And James White is here. He's on our board as well. He has a couple committees a committee that he's on. And Kathy Haley, I saw her as well.
Jeanette's on.
We have one of our members, Adele Hill. I saw her on here as well.
Jeanette Alamia.
Jeanette's
on.
I saw Jeanette. Shout out to everybody that's here, and we hope to see you in a couple of weeks.
Shout out to you, Gail, because you cracked me up. you knew to stop me when I got going too. I love it.
But you was like I am. When I get excited and passionate, I mean, I teach one class, and it's like when I get into it in my students.